Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We'll give it one more minute because we don't want to start earlier than the time. So just give us a second. And we'll get started. Today we have a very interesting subject we're going to discuss. Glad you're all feeling well today. Okay. Here we go. Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to Lunch Break with the Rabbi. Today, Wednesday, August 12th, the 22nd of Av. Today we're going to talk about something that was very common. The Jews and non-Jews alike use the terminology. And where does this terminology come from? Why do we say it? What does it mean? And that is, of course, the terminology which means Mazel Tov. Why do we say Mazel Tov? Where is the origination of the word Mazel Tov? Where does it come from? And you will be surprised today as we delve a little deeper into this word. What does it mean? The first time the term Mazel, is used in the Bible is found in the book of Kings, at the end of Kings 2, where it tells us about the king Yoshiyahu, who was the grandson of Menashe. We spoke a few days ago about Menashe. He was a terrible king at first and then eventually repented. But he was a great idolater who took an idol and placed it into the Holy Temple. His grandson later on, Yoshio, repented, or not only repented, rectified many of the things that his grandfather did wrong and removed many of the pagan altars and utensils that were used in the temple. One of the terminologies there that it says in the actual Tanakh at the time is that these were temples that were used for all kinds of worship of pagan ideas, that they worshiped the sun, the moon, and the mazalot. Mazel. What does mazel literally translate? Is either star, constellation of many stars, and any type of heavenly body. So when we talk about the word mazel in that context, it means as constellations. As well as the word mazal comes from the word nozel, to drip, to flow. Meaning that because these planetary bodies flow along in a certain course in the sky, so therefore it's called the mazal, a constellation of how these things flow. Now, in Talmudic and medieval times, the Jewish sages have taught us, and as we find this, as we're soon going to see in the Talmud, that the position of the planets at any given time affects and impacts the events of the individual or of the world, what we would call today, common language, astrology. Does that mean today we can go and ask an astrologer what is the future, what it would be, and how it would be? We'll get to that in a moment, but the simple answer is no. And why we'll get to in a moment. So the following passage you will see, I'm going to quote a passage in the Talmud where the Talmud discusses that the birth of a certain person at a certain time can affect the way the person grows up to be. For example, it says in the Talmud, in the Tractate of Shabbos, one who is born under the constellation of the sun will be a distinguished man, will eat and drink of his own, and his secrets will lie uncovered. If a thief, he will have no success. One who is born under Venus will be a wealthy and unchaste. One who is born in Mercury will be retentive memory and wise. One who is born under the moon will be a man who suffer evil. He will build and demolish and build. He will eat and drink, which will not be his, and his secrets will remain hidden. If a thief, it will be successful. One who is born under Saturn, he will be a man whose plans will be frustrated. Others say all nefarious designs against him will be frustrated. One who is born under Jupiter, he will be a right-doing man. One who is born under Mars, he will be a shedder of blood. Rav Ashi observed, he will be a surgeon or a thief or a slaughterer or a circumciser. Abraham said before God, I have looked by my constellations and I have found that I am not fated to beget a child. God replied, cease your planet gazing. What is your calculation? The Jupiter, the constellations you were born under, stand in the west. I will turn it back to place it in the east. Now, this is a quote of the Talmud, where the Talmud seemingly says different constellations cause and affect the way a person will rule his life. Now, what is it? The Talmud over here seems to embrace some type of form of astrology. It is interesting to note that all of these different types of astrological type of meanings is because every one of these galaxies or constellations have a word which is symbolic to it. For example, Saturn in Hebrew is called Shapsoi, which means rest, and therefore it says that he will be a man whose plans maybe are frustrated or designs against him. Another thing we can also see is the very fact, or it says that Abraham born in the east and the west that it was colder, so therefore wasn't conducive for childbirth. In the east, it was conducive for childbirth. But taking this even a step further, is that we see that the Talmud, so to speak, says that your future is, so to speak, written in the stars. Now, is that correct to read the stars or not? Now, generally speaking, as I mentioned before, the short answer is no. We cannot go to an astrologer and ask them for the future, is because most astrologers need to use a certain type of imagination when they see the constellation in the stars. And even Abraham did not read the stars correctly. How much more so today? There are many people that may not read the stars correctly as well. There's a very famous story, and this leads us into the next thing, is about Rabbi Akiva. That it was an astrologer who came to Rabbi Akiva and told him that his daughter was going to die on the day of her wedding. And Rabbi Akiva paid no attention, but he told his daughter to add in charity and to be extra diligent in charity on the day of her wedding, because charity saves a person from death. And there was a pauper who came to the wedding, and Rabbi Akiva's daughter, who was the bride, went to this pauper, took a whole table full of food, and gave it to him and made sure that he was taken care of and everything else. That night, she came home after the wedding, and she took out her pin, or whatever it was that was holding her here, and she stuck it into the wall to keep it for safekeeping. The next morning, when she woke up, she saw that that pin that she stuck into the wall killed a snake, a poisonous snake that was going to kill her. And over here, you see that the actual charity saved her from death. What does that take us to? That the concept of astrologers, which is that the astrologers can predict something, but their predictions can always be changed because of the way we behave and because of what we do. So over here in Rabbi Akiva's case, there was an astrology that gave a prediction that she may die, but because of the charity that she did, she changed the astrologer's method. Abraham as well, because of astrologers, God says, I'm going to change it. So too, when we come to the concept of the idea of astrology being predicting a certain concept, this concept of astrology can be changed through our prayer, through our saying Tehillim and asking God for a change in this way, and we can escape whatever fate that mazal, that galaxy may give. Secondly, just because the astrology does say a certain thing, we can always use our own attitude and our own intuition to change it. For example, Rabbi Yashi says that if a person is born under the constellation of Madim, which is blood, he's going to be a murderer. He doesn't have to be a murderer, as Rabbi Yashi says. He can be a surgeon, he can be a slaughterer, he can be one who does ritual circumcision. They all have to do with blood, but use it in a positive way. And so too with all the different things that are mentioned by the different constellations, that all of these are not necessarily a negative. We can take those influences and use them for a positive. So it's not necessarily imposing upon the person of what he has to be. That individual can use that tendency for a positive as well. However, there are some authorities, for example, Maimonides. Maimonides is of the opinion that many of these discussions in the Talmud are of agadic meaning, and therefore they're more metaphors, and they're not to be taken literally. And therefore, Judaism does not put any credit to astrology. We know that we have to believe absolutely in God. Even those who did have some type of belief in astrology also agreed that we have to, we're not allowed to ask an astrologer, because our belief has to be in absolute God and not going through any mediums. And astrologers would be some type of medium, so to speak. And also the concept that we know that Ein Mazal Yisrael, that means that Jewish people are not ruled or governed by any constellation or by any luck, so to speak, and we are above and beyond, and we are not regulated to any of those things, like we mentioned, for the two reasons. Reason number one because we can pray and overcome it. And reason number two is because we can change and use it in a different type of persuasion. But then where does it come from, Mazel Tov? Where does that level come from? So many of the great rabbis bring an interesting statement that they know that when a person is born, there's a certain type of consolation that does have an effect on them. Therefore, that Rabbi Yehuda Chassid brings in Sefer Chassidim, he was a rabbi from the 11th century, and he says as follows: when a woman is in labor and others are outside the room in the same house, they are ought to pray for mercy upon her, and that the child should be born under a good mazel. And the word good mazel comes from mazel tov. So the initial mazel tov greeting was when a woman was giving birth, that she should give birth, and that child, through his tenacity or through his tendencies, and that the blessings that they give him, that he should use the constellations that he was born with for his benefit, and this should be a productive child, being a productive person in society. Over the centuries, this greeting of Mazel Tov extended not only to when a child was born, but also became a way of giving a complimentary, congratulatory wish that whenever an occasion happens in a person's life, it became more of a prayer and a blessing and a congratulations that make sure that they should have a special mazel, a special constellation, and a special way of bringing about special good luck, so to speak, in their new endeavor. That, what we mentioned until now, is the simple meaning according to the revealed parts of the Torah. However, the esoteric teachings of the Torah, Kabbalah and Hasidism, delve a little bit deeper. As we know with everything in Torah, there is what we see on the surface, and then when we go a little bit deeper. And a little bit deeper into this concept is that we know that God in this world is infinite. He's undefined and he's unlimited. And in order for God to come into this world and make us have the ability to comprehend and appreciate God's presence in this world, God had to, so to speak, concise himself within 10 different faculties, as we call Sefirot, and what we know as wisdom, understanding, application, kindness, rejection, all the different types of 10 Sefirot, and those are finite expressions of God's infinite, of God's undefined expression. Normally, when we work in a system of events, God expresses himself in this world in a system of a finite level of expressing certain different measures of what we are capable of handling. However, there are times that God breaks the pattern and he goes beyond, and we're able to receive a level of undefined blessings, of undefined gratitude, of undefined relationship and cultivation with God. And that exactly what Hasidism and Kabbalah calls Mazel Tov. The word Mazel Tov, as we started, begins from the word to drip. What happens when something drips? What is the definition of dripping? Generally, I give something, there's a direct flow. But if I want it should overflow, that means it's dripping from all edges. I want an undefined love, not something which is constrained to a certain level. And therefore, when wishing a person Mazel Tov is what we're saying, you should have such good that is not limited to a certain finite level that goes by chamber and so on. The good should come pouring upon you. It should be flowing. It should be dripping. It should be coming from all ends. That's what Mazel Tov means according to Kabbalah. That the good from God should be unrestricted, undefined. You should just have it all. Not in a level that it has to come in some type of a fusion, some type of finite relationship, not because I earned it. In fact, the difference between mazal and earning a reward is when you earn something, whatever you worked on, that's how much you're going to earn. Mazel, luck, means a person buys a lotto ticket, he only paid $1, but he can get millions of dollars. It's incalculable. It's something which is in nothing that you can't even compare the two. This is what we tell a person, Mazel Tov. You should have good luck. That means you should have a good dripping, a good overflowing. It shouldn't be related to the work that you put in, but it should be more and expounded and undefined in the greatest level of expansion, surpassing any type of calculation of why and how you should deserve it. So in summary, the reason why we say Mazel Tov is, number one, the Talmud embraces the concept of some type of form of astrology and explains that Mazel Tov, its origins came from the constellations, that it should be a good constellation, then you should be using, that it should have any given constellation should have a good outcome, and that the human being maintains his free choice to make sure that outcome is used and persevered and preserved for a good way. On a mystical level, the reason of Mazel Tov refers to God, that he is beyond limitations and definitions, and therefore when wishing a person Mazel Tov, we are giving him the greatest blessings, that they should have goodness and joy from God's infinite level of God, which surpasses any calculation of merit, an undefined, unregulated, but an unbelievable blessing that they should get regardless. With this, I wish you all Mazel Tov, that we should all have that blessing from God, undefined, unrestricted, surpassing any calculation. Have a great day, a wonderful day. We'll see you tomorrow discussing Ethics of Our Fathers, Chapter 5. Wishing you the very best for a wonderful day.